The sea has always been a place where I go to listen, not to the voices of others, but to something older, deeper. The kind of voice that doesn't speak in words, but in tides and winds and the long stretch of silence between the waves. That's where I saw him. A figure walking alone just beyond the tide's reach. The sand gave way under his steps, and still he walked slowly, as though the horizon were calling him forward. He wasn't young, not old either, but there was a weight in his shoulders, a gravity in the way he carried himself that made him feel older than the sea. I didn't mean to watch, but my eyes kept finding him. The way the light touched his face, the way his shadow stretched long and thin behind him, as if even the sun were reluctant to let him go. I wondered who he was. A stranger, yes, but also more than that. He seemed like someone who belonged to the place itself, as though he hadn't arrived here, but had always been here, waiting for the right pair of eyes to notice. Something about him unsettled me, not with fear, but with recognition. That strange ache you feel when you see someone and you cannot name them, and yet your heart insists you have known them all your life. The wind carried his hair across his forehead. He paused once, looked out at the waves, and I swear the sea leaned closer to listen. I thought, perhaps he is a man who comes here every evening to place his secrets in the water. Perhaps the ocean knows more about him than any living soul. Or maybe he is running, not from the world, but from the parts of himself that still demand answers. And so I sat on the cool sand, watching, breathing in the salt air, and letting the story of him begin to write itself in me. He walked as though time itself were stretched thin, as though each step was less about arriving and more about listening to the ground beneath him. The tide reached forward, then pulled away like an endless breath. And in that rhythm, I felt the quiet pull of his presence. His hands. They hung loose at his sides, but every now and then one would rise, fingers brushing the air as if searching for something unseen. Perhaps a memory. Perhaps the shape of a hand he once held. When he stopped, he didn't stand stiff like most men do. He leaned slightly, almost bowing to the sea, and I thought, how rare it is to see a man who does not fight the silence, but welcomes it, as though silence were not emptiness to him, but a companion. The gulls circled above, their cries sharp and fleeting, and still he did not look up. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, that invisible line between the known and the unknowable. I wanted to know what he saw there, a promise, a warning, a memory that refused to loosen its grip. The longer I watched, the more I felt that he was not simply walking a beach. He was walking through something vast and unseen, perhaps grief, perhaps longing, or perhaps a love so large, so uncontainable, that only the ocean could carry it. And as I sat there, bare toes curling into the cool sand, I realized something. I was no longer simply watching him. I was being drawn into him, like a tide that doesn't ask permission before it pulls you under. His presence was a mirror, and in him I began to see my own questions, my own shadows, the longings I had buried in the folds of my own silence. I wondered what it would mean if he turned. If, in that quiet moment between the waves, he looked back and his eyes found mine. Would he smile? Would he pause? Or would he recognize me the way I felt I recognized him, as if we were not strangers at all, but echoes from the same shore? In my mind, I walked beside him, our steps keeping time with the pull of the tide. I imagined the sound of his voice, low, steady, like something carved by distance and silence. I imagined the stories he might carry, the places that had shaped him, the names that had once made his heart quicken. Perhaps he would tell me of a love he lost, and I would tell him of the love I still search for. Perhaps we would walk without words, and it would be enough. Two lives converging for a brief stretch of sand before parting again. The thought of it stirred something in me, a longing that felt both dangerous and necessary. Not dangerous because of him, but because of what it awakened in me. That sharp reminder that the heart is never as guarded as we believe it to be. And yet, even as I imagined it, I knew the man was less a person to be met and more a presence to be felt. He was possibility embodied, and sometimes it is possibility itself that saves us. And then, as all moments do, it began to slip away. The light softened, the sky folding itself into shades of gold and violet. The waves stretched farther up the sand, washing over the places he had walked, until no trace of his footsteps remained. He kept moving, his figure growing smaller against the horizon, until he was no longer a man, but a silhouette, and then not even that, just a memory carried by the sea. I did not follow, I did not call out. I only sat there, listening to the hush of the tide, feeling something within me shift. Because the truth was this: he did not need to turn, or see me, or speak a single word. He had already given me what I needed, a reminder that longing is not emptiness, that the heart still stirs, still reaches, still believes in the possibility of connection. The man on the beach was never just a man. He was a mirror, a mystery, a message left in the language of waves. And as the night gathered around me, I rose from the sand with a strange, quiet peace. For the ocean had spoken, and I had listened. There's a moment when watching turns inward, when the stranger you study becomes less a person and more a doorway. That's what he was to me. His footsteps pressed into the wet sand, fading almost as quickly as they appeared. And I thought of my own footprints, the places I had been, the choices I had made, the moments that had left their mark on me, and then slipped quietly back into the tide of time. He seemed to belong to the horizon, but I belonged to all the questions I had never dared to ask. What have I been waiting for? Who have I been waiting for? I thought of love, not the kind sung in songs or written in stories, but the kind that lingers at the edge of a person, a quiet companion, a presence that never fully leaves. Watching him, I felt the ache of all the times I had turned away from that kind of love. The moments I had chosen silence when I should have spoken. The times I had protected myself, not realizing that protection was also a kind of prison. The wind pressed against my face, and for a moment I closed my eyes. I let the sound of the waves pour through me, as though the ocean might answer the questions I had carried like stones. And in the rhythm of that water, I understood. This man was not just a man. He was a reflection of every longing I had hidden, every tenderness I had locked away, every dream I had convinced myself was too fragile to keep alive. He stood at the edge of the sea, but I stood at the edge of myself, and perhaps, just perhaps, we were both searching for the same horizon.